Cuba's history is being marked by its relations with the United States. One of the unsolved problems is the case of the Cuban Five, who were gathering information in Miami to prevent terrorist attacks. Two of them has returned to their homeland. Today, we invited Fernando Gonzalez to share some of his experience and to watch some images of his coming back. He was in jail for more than 10 years after a questionable trial. Now he dedicates all his time to fight for the freedom of the other three that remain in the United States.
Buenas tardes. Ya se encuentra en nuestra patria Fernando González. El héroe de la República de Cuba y luchador antiterrorista Fernando González llegó al mediodía de hoy a nuestra patria.
So Fernando, this coming here to Cuba was a drastic change, right? From a prison, a day and a half, and then suddenly in your homeland. How was it?
It's a very drastic change, as you said, and it's very intense too. I mean, emotionally speaking, it's probably the most intense moment in my life. I don't think I will live through any, emotionally speaking, a moment like this in the rest of my life. I mean, there's a lot of things happening at the same time. The fact that I'm returning to the country, seeing my family, the family of my brothers that were there, friends and people that I know. It's all happening suddenly, and it's all at the same time. So it's just when I was flying back to Cuba, as we were approaching the island.
What were you thinking in that moment when you were approaching?
Well, I was sitting in a position in a small airplane that I had my back to the front of the airplane. So I was constantly turning back to see through the window, expecting the moment where I would be able to see the shoreline. And that was very intense too. When I looked back through the window and I saw the shoreline and I saw the skyline of Havana, and it was very intense. And I think, well, finally I'm here. Something that I've been longing for so long. And then the airplane is approaching, and it goes into the territory and the land, and I start seeing places and images of the land that are familiar to me. And then we land in the international airport, and I'm looking through the window, and I see something that is an image, and that is I'm very familiar with.
You were talking about the drastic change that was this getting here. So, I mean, you knew that you were coming here, but anyway, it was everything very, very quickly. And we can see in the images of the testimony of your returning here, your interaction with the President Raúl Castro and the big hug. And how do you feel about the fact that you came here and he received you, welcomed you?
Well, I felt, and I still feel, very honored. I mean, he's very busy. He's got a lot of responsibilities, and he took time to be at the airport and meet me there and receive me. Not only him, but all the members of the political bureau and the government and the state. So I'm very grateful for that, and it was also part of this very emotional experience. Even though he's a person that is very colloquial and he makes you feel relaxed around him, but you can't escape the fact that he's the president, and he had that gesture of him to go there and receive me, and I felt, and I still feel, very honored for that, and it was a very special moment. I mean, it was a very informal exchange, but he had very nice words to say about me and about my family, and part of that experience that I was talking about before, about all the emotions that I was experiencing at the moment. Very nice, very, very important moment for me. We're five different individuals who think and act like one. And we don't, sometimes, or most of the times, we don't need to ask anybody about how any of us is thinking, because we have a very uncommon way of realize, being aware of what the other person is thinking. I mean, we all have a unity of thought, and that was created as we went through very difficult moments, and as we prepared for the trial and we faced the situations we were living. That created a unity that nothing is going to break. So we act and like one, even though we're 5 different individuals with 5 different personalities.
You're coming back to your homeland. It was also like a encounter with Havana City.
Well, I grew up in Havana. I mean, I was born in Havana. I grew up my whole life in Havana, and I missed the people, the way we live in Havana, the speed of life in a big city, and the noises, the sea. I like I mean, it was a common experience for me to see the coastline or the sea, and I missed it a lot. And that's why I always try to be close to it. And there's things that I missed. I mean, I'm talking about physical, geographically speaking. And I also miss my family and my loved ones. Talking about Havana, that's mostly what I missed.
Okay, so let's go to a place in which we can see the sea closer. Okay.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Okay. So, Fernando, why do you like this place?
I like this place because it's very quiet, especially early in the morning, and I can see Havana, the horizon. I can see the sea, which I missed a lot when I was in prison, and it's a beautiful place.
So what else did you miss about Havana and your life here in Cuba when you were in prison?
Well, mostly I missed my loved ones, my family, my friends, and the way we live in the city, the way we live in Cuba. I was a prisoner, but I was also a foreigner. So it was a different culture for me to live around. And even though you learn about different backgrounds, it's not your culture. I mean, you miss the little things that happen every day. The way we live in the city, the way we live in Cuba, how we relate to each other. And those are things that I missed, and especially my family, my loved ones.
That's a big sacrifice, Fernando. Why did you decide to make this kind of sacrifice and this risk that you took by doing this, of being in Miami trying to gather information about terrorist activities against Cuba? Why did you decide to make that kind of sacrifice that not only involves you, but your own family?
Well, first of all, I don't see it as a sacrifice. I see it as something that was needed. And of course, there was a risk. But I never saw it as a sacrifice. I saw it as something that was a duty. I grew up in a family and in a society that, as part of our revolution, that instilled some values in me. That, I mean, it wasn't difficult for me when they asked me to do something like this. Being a Cuban that grew up in the 60s, in the 70s, so close to the history of attacks against Cuba, the hostility of the U.S. government against our people. It wasn't difficult for me to make the choice and make the decision to take that risk.
You were in the center of, in the middle of an environment very complex in Miami. It is said that these groups, it was said by Fidel Castro once, works like a mob, like a mafia. What did you see, and you can share, that makes these groups mafias?
Well, it is a mafia. It is there is a mob mentality in those groups. The mentality that if I cannot get away with my way of doing things, I'm going to influence and mobilize people. I'm going to force people to do it the way I want to. And that's
with violence?
With violence, and I'm forcing people to act emotionally without thinking, and acting even against their own interest and against their own will. If you force people through the media, through the political influence, through blackmail, with the possibility of losing your job, losing the way you support your family, and that forces people to act in certain ways that's in most of the cases it goes against their own interests. And that's the way some groups in Miami, especially the Cuban American National Foundation, acts. That's the way they did it. That's the way they still do it, even though things have been changing. But that mob mentality is created through the media, through the radio stations, through the newspapers, through the local TV channels. It creates that mentality that if I don't do it the way that these political groups want it to be, it might have a cost for me personally, for my family, and then people have to act in that way.
What is it that they want? What's they been wanting towards Cuba since 1959?
Well, they want this political reality that we have here, this social project that we are building and perfecting and trying to improve. They want it to disappear. They don't want a part of it. They don't want to be a part of a Cuba, the Cuba that we dream of. They don't want to be a part of it. They basically want to destroy it. And that's the way it's been for longer than 55 years. And there are political groups in Miami that are evolving to a different mentality. We have witnessed news about certain leaders in the community, business people, very well-known business people in Cuba who have been against Cuba for a long time, and lately they've been changing their minds. But these political groups, the hardcore Cuban mafia, is still their goal is still to destroy what we have, and that's basically what they want.
It's been said that the trial was against Cuba and not against the Five. That's something that we can read along in the Cuban press. That has to do with the fact that the Cuban Five did not have a fair trial. It was in Miami. Why can we say that this trial was against Cuba and not against you as people?
Well, because this history that we're talking about, there is a long history of hostility against Cuba coming from Miami. And there is a hostility that you can breathe in the air in Miami because everything that is published in the newspapers, everything that is said in the radio stations that are controlled by those political groups in Miami, and all the things that you see in the news, they create a mentality and they create an opinion about Cuba that is very far away from the reality of Cuba. They live in an emotional environment in which everything in Cuba is bad. Everything, if you live in Miami and you read the press and you listen to the radio and you watch the news, the impression that you get is like that Cuba is crumbling, that the government in Cuba is going to fall any day, and it's an environment created by these political groups in the interest of manipulating people. They try for the people not to be rational, but to be emotional, and that kind of influence we cannot separate from the fact that we were being tried in that environment. Anything that you said about Cuba is going to be taken in a way that is different than it would be taken in any other part of the United States. And it's related to what I was saying before when you asked me about the Cuban mafia. There are people that are being part of that jury that was listening to the evidence that were concerned about the consequences that might have, they might suffer if they reach a verdict that in some way was different than what the Cuban mafia was asking for and was expecting, and it could have an impact on their own lives and their own way of earning a living. And you cannot separate that from the fact that it was in Miami where we were being tried, even though we made all kinds of efforts to express and to make the judge decide to try us just 30 miles away from Miami. We were not asking to go to other state. We were asking to go to Fort Lauderdale, just 30 miles north of Miami, but it wasn't, the decision of the judge was not to do it, and that ended up being of great influence in the outcome of the trial.
I have a question. Cuba, after 55 years of revolutions, have had a lot of problems, economic problems. And there is a perception internationally that there are too many problems here. But it's like a contradiction for some people. The fact that even though these problems, the Cuban people, there's a consensus in Cuba that remains, and 5 people like yourselves that make this kind of sacrifice for project, for kind of country that we live here in these islands. Why do you defend Cuba?
Well, there is a history. Even though I grew up in the revolution, within the revolution, there is a history before that revolution. And we know that, and we are aware of that history of what Cuba used to be before the revolution. And the revolution is not only has not only brought to us material conditions that are improvements in terms of what we used to have before the revolution. It has brought us also pride. It has also brought us dignity, because Cuba was a dependency of the United States before the revolution. So it's not only a matter of what the revolution has done for us materially. I mean, the condition of living, the access to education, to health care, to the enjoyment of the cultural life, to many things, access to conditions of living that are very improved if we compare it with the way Cuba lived before the revolution. It's not only in that sense, it's only in the sense of the values that the revolution had brought to us. I mean, the sense of dignity, the sense of we Cubans are independent, that we Cuba have our own sovereignty and we defend that. Those are values that we share now, all the Cuban society share, and we cherish too. So it's both. Materially, we have gained a lot, but we have gained also in the sense of the values that we have, and I think it's something that is for any Cuban, we are all proud of defending that kind of society with all the difficulties that we have. Some are difficulties that we have to solve by ourselves. Some are difficulties that are not or of our own creation. It depends on the international context in which not only Cuba but the whole world lives, and we are working on solving those difficulties, the ones that we are able to solve by ourselves. But it's a project that is worth fighting for. I mean, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the insatisfaction in some sense, there is a sense of justice. There is a fight for justice for everybody, and the sense of making and achieving that justice in the general sense, that justice reaches every corner of the country and every corner of the world too, because we cannot separate the fight that we have here and the effort that we make in Cuba is always related to what we want for the world. So that sense of justice is worth fighting for, and it's worth defending.
You are here you're back in your homeland in Cuba. We can see this beautiful Havana, these boats, and this, it's very hot this summer as usually in Cuba. But there are 3 of your friends which are not here in Cuba. They haven't been released because of their sentences. Are you optimistic about the possibility of they coming back?
Well, first, they are my friends, but they're more than that. They're my brothers, and I'm optimistic. I'm not only optimistic. I'm not that they will be back. When
That's the
that will
question.
happen, that depends on us. Depends on the effort that we make, and we're making an effort. And I'm sure that it depends also on certain political context, but we have to fight. We have to create circumstances for the reality, to create the circumstances that make the government of the United States take the decision that it needs to take, because it's only a matter of political will from the President of the United States to release those three brothers of mine and send them back to Cuba. I don't think it's a matter of the courts, even though we can achieve certain improvements in their conditions through the courts. I think at the end of the road, it's going to be a political decision. So it is for us to make the effort to create the circumstances for that political will to manifest itself and make the government of the United States do the right thing.
Fernando, you're back here in Cuba. I know you're working a lot, very hard in order to help the fight for the other three to come back finally. But I think you might have noticed the fact that you, the five, are very powerful symbols here in Cuba. Symbols of patriotism, of loyalty to the project of the revolution. How that makes you feel?
Well, it's a difficult question, because and it's a difficult reality. I mean, I'm a very regular person, and it's something that I have to get used to, that people see me that way, and I understand it. I mean, I'm a Cuban, born in the revolution, raised in the revolution, with the values that we all Cubans have, or most of the Cubans have. And I can place myself in the situation of how would I see people that are in the situation that the five are. So I understand what people feel, and I try to correspond to that, and I try to understand the shows of affection, which is nice, enriches my life, and at the same time it's something that I can understand, but I have to get used to it. It's difficult, and I'm not everywhere that I go to. Sometimes I'm driving through Havana, and I stop the traffic light, and the people that are in the car next to me, they wave to me, and I know and I understand that what they're doing is expressing the solidarity, the support, the compromise in the fight for the other three. But it's a reality that is new to me. Like, it's new to me, being sitting with a news reporter and or journalist and doing an interview. It's a life that I'm not totally comfortable with yet, and I need to make an effort, because I understand that it's part of the reality, and it's important for the people, and that's. And it's important to me too, because I learn a lot from the exchanges with the people. Those people that spontaneously they come to me and express their feelings and their compromise. It's very beautiful. My challenge is how to translate that and how to make that experience reach the three brothers that are still in prison, so they can feel at least a little bit what I'm receiving.
I have a personal question. Even though you've been a victim of the hate that remains in the United States towards Cuba, do you consider yourself a happy person?
I'm a very happy person. There's still a part of me that is not fully happy, because that's going to happen when the three brothers come back. But I'm living the experience of being free. I'm living the experience of being back in Cuba with my people, with my family, with my loved ones, and that's happiness to me. With the little space, there is a room for more happiness, And that room is going to be filled up when the three brothers come back, and then we five are here.
Thank you very much, Fernando. It's been a pleasure to hear you, to know you as a person, and in the name of my generation who grew up after the 90s, it's a privilege to have here men like you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.